Trump administration has blasted back against an NBC News exclusive report came out yesterday about Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's private fury about his treatment at the hands of President Trump. The report says Tillerson was on the verge of resigning this past summer, which sources say led to an intervention by Vice President Mike Pence and other high-ranking administration officials. There was also the assertion, backed by 3 sources, that Tillerson openly disparaged the president, referring to him as a moron after a July meeting at the Pentagon. Tillerson made a surprise announcement before the press yesterday and then engaged with reporters, something, by the way, he's rarely done since taking office.
The Vice President has never had to persuade me to remain as Secretary of State because I have never considered leaving this post. I serve at the appointment of the President, and I'm here for as long as the President feels I can be useful to achieving his objectives. Let me tell you what I've learned about this President, whom I did not know before taking this office. He loves his country. He puts Americans and America first. He's smart. He demands results wherever he goes, and he holds those around him accountable for whether they've done the job he's asked them to do. While I'm new to Washington, I have learned that there are some who try to sow dissension to advance their own agenda by tearing others apart in an effort to undermine President Trump's own agenda. I do not, and I will not operate that way. And the same applies to everyone on my team here at the State Department. President Trump and his administration will keep moving forward as one team with one mission, doing great things for the United States of America to make America great again.
Could you address the main headline of this story that you called the president a moron? And if not, where do you think these reports or ideas are?
I'm not going to deal with petty stuff like that. I mean, this is what I don't understand about Washington. Again, you know, I'm not from this place, but the places I come from, we don't deal with that kind of petty nonsense. And it is intended to do nothing but divide people. And I'm just not going to be part of this effort to divide this administration.
All right. Well, Rex Tillerson has proven in the past he's very good at answering just the questions that he wants to answer. We saw that certainly after Charlottesville, when he was on Fox News Sunday, and he told Chris Wallace when pressed on whether he agreed with the president on what he'd said after Charlottesville, that the president speaks for himself and basically himself only. Bob Costa, no answer yesterday from the Secretary of State on the specific question. Of course, his spokesperson clarified it later that he never did call the president a moron. But obviously, both gentlemen have decided that it's in their best interest to stay put, at least for a little while, the president and the Secretary of State. What can you tell us?
This is yet another chapter in an uneasy relationship between the Secretary of State. As he said, he's an outsider, but he's an outsider not only to Washington, but to President Trump's inner circle. And so many of the president's confidants have told me that this has been a point of tension ever since day one. They do not expect Secretary Tillerson to last more than perhaps a year and a half as Secretary of State, that he's been frustrated by the experience in general. But he does have many key allies in the foreign policy community, and he is seen as someone who offers a bit of a different perspective on some of these deals, whether it's the Iran nuclear deal or when it comes to having some kind of interaction with North Korea. So there's some people like Senator Corker, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, who like to have him there. So there's not a move to push him out at the moment.
And Carol Lee, what can you tell us about your reporting a day later? Obviously, the White House pushed back hard yesterday, called it fake news. But what can you tell us 24 hours later about the original story as it ran and any follow-ups that you did yesterday?
Well, we, of course, stand by our original story, which said that Secretary Tillerson in July, his frustrations had completely mounted, and that Secretary Mattis and then Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly intervened, tried to convince him to stay. After that, Vice President Pence came in, had a meeting with him, gave him what was described as a pep talk, and said you need to move forward in a way in which you're on board with the president's agenda. You know, the White House, obviously, we expected them to push back on that. You know, they denied it before we ran the story, but we are very confident in our source. We spoke with a dozen people for this story, and I think yesterday I talked to a White House official after Secretary Tillerson's remarks, and this person said, you know, I was willing to give Secretary Tillerson the benefit of the doubt, but he very clearly did, in fact, call the president a moron, or he would have answered that question. And you know, I think the big question now is what happens with this relationship, and it's not just a palace intrigue story. While that's interesting, this has significant consequences for U.S. foreign policy, and you know, if these two can't work it out and in some way that makes this a functional business-like relationship, then it's going to get very complicated because, as we've been talking about, there's a number of very significant high-stakes crises in the world, whether it's North Korea or the Iran nuclear deal. But it's not clear that this is a relationship that is repairable.